"I didn't hit him. They're covering up what really happened." These were the desperate words Karen Reed screamed as Massachusetts State Police dragged her away in handcuffs, charging her with murdering her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. But what if she's telling the truth? What if the real killers are the same people investigating the crime? On January 29, 2022, Officer John O'Keefe was found dead in a snowbank outside a fellow officer's home in Canton, Massachusetts. The prosecution claims Karen struck him with her SUV and left him to freeze to death. But Karen and her supporters claim she's being framed by corrupt cops, covering up the fact that John was beaten to death inside the house by other police officers. This is the story of conflicting witnesses, suspicious evidence tampering, deleted text messages, and a case so controversial it's divided an entire state between Free Karen Reed supporters and those who believe she's a cold-blooded killer. If you're new to The Only Witness, welcome to the channel where we expose the truth behind America's most controversial cases. Before we dive into one of the most explosive trials in recent memory, a case involving police corruption allegations, a hung jury, and a retrial that could finally reveal the truth, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe with notifications on, and comment below where you're watching from. Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island? We want to hear from all 50 states because this case has become a national obsession. This is the story of Karen Reed, the woman accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend. Or is it the story of an innocent woman being framed by the very people sworn to protect and serve? You decide. Karen Reed was 41 years old in January 2022, working as an adjunct professor at Bentley College in Massachusetts. She was educated, professional, and living a quiet life in the Boston suburbs. Karen had been dating Boston police officer John O'Keefe for about 2 years, and by all accounts, they were a loving couple despite some ups and downs. John O'Keefe was 46 years old, a 16-year veteran of the Boston Police Department. He was known as a good cop, a dedicated officer, and most importantly, he was raising his teenage niece and nephew after their parents died. John's family described him as devoted to those kids, and Karen had become part of their lives, helping John raise them. On the night of January 28, 2022, Karen and John went out with a group of friends to bars in Canton, Massachusetts. It was a typical Friday night, drinks, socializing, nothing unusual. Around midnight, the group decided to continue the party at the home of Brian Albert, a fellow Boston police officer who lived at 34 Fairview Road in Canton. What happened next depends entirely on who you believe. According to the prosecution's version of events, Karen drove John to the Albert house around 12:30 a.m. She claims she dropped John off at the curb, but prosecutors say she was drunk, angry at John after an argument, and when he got out of her Lexus SUV, she deliberately struck him with her vehicle in a fit of rage. She then drove away, leaving John lying in the snow injured and dying from hypothermia. Karen allegedly went home, but when John didn't return and wouldn't answer his phone, she became concerned. She drove back to the Albert house around 5 a.m. with John's niece and a friend, Kerry Roberts. That's when they found John's body in the snow on the front lawn, partially covered in fresh snowfall from the blizzard that had rolled through overnight. John O'Keefe was dead. He had multiple injuries, including a skull fracture, lacerations on his arm, and hypothermia. He'd been lying in the freezing snow for hours. Karen immediately became hysterical, screaming, I hit him, oh my God, I hit him." According to witnesses, those words would become the centerpiece of the prosecution's case against her. But Karen Reed tells a completely different story, and her version involves police corruption, evidence tampering, and a cover-up. According to Karen and her defense team, she did drop John off at the Albert house, but he went inside to the party. While inside, something happened, a fight, an altercation, and John was beaten, possibly by other police officers or their friends. John was then carried outside and dumped in the snow to make it look like an accident or that Karen had hit him with her car. Karen claims her statements of "I hit him" were not a confession, but rather her panicked misinterpretation of what must have happened when she saw John's body. She thought maybe she'd accidentally backed into him when dropping him off, not that she'd deliberately run him over. The defense argues that the police immediately focused on Karen as a suspect because she was an outsider, and it allowed them to cover up what really happened inside Brian Albert's house. They point to the fact that Brian Albert, the homeowner where John allegedly was beaten to death, is a Boston police officer. His brother, Chris Albert, is a police officer. Multiple other cops were at that party, and they all have reason to cover up what happened. Before we explore the shocking evidence that supports both sides of this case, make sure you're subscribed to The Only Witness and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. This case is about to get even more controversial with allegations of deleted evidence, suspicious searches, and possible police corruption. The evidence in the Karen Reed case is where things get extremely complicated and controversial. Both the prosecution and defense presented compelling but contradictory evidence during her trial. Prosecution. Evidence. The prosecution's case focused on several key pieces of evidence. 1. Karen's own words. Multiple witnesses testified that Karen said, "I hit him," when she found John's body. Prosecutors argued this was a confession. 2. Vehicle damage. Karen's Lexus SUV had a broken taillight and damage consistent with hitting a person. Investigators found pieces of taillight at the scene. 3. Forensic analysis. A biomechanics expert testified that John's injuries were consistent with being struck by a vehicle traveling in reverse. 4. Google searches. Karen's phone showed she had searched "How long does it take to die in cold?" at 2:27 a.m. before she discovered John's body. 5. Witness testimony. Several people testified that Karen and John had been fighting that night and that Karen appeared drunk. Defense evidence. The defense presented evidence suggesting Karen was framed and that John was actually beaten to death inside the Albert house. 1. Injuries inconsistent with vehicle strike. Medical experts testified that John's injuries, particularly deep scratches on his arm and bruising patterns, were more consistent with a fight and/or dog attack than being hit by a car. 2. Missing hair. John had clumps of hair ripped from his scalp, which doesn't happen in vehicle strikes, but does happen in fights. 3. No damage to clothing. John's clothing showed no tire marks, grease, or damage consistent with being hit by a vehicle. 4. Albert family dog. Brian Albert owned a German Shepherd, and John's arm injuries looked suspiciously like dog bites. The defense suggested John was attacked by the dog during a fight inside the house. 5. Suspicious searches. Federal investigators discovered that Brian Albert's wife searched "How long to die in cold" on her phone at the same time as Karen's phone showed that search, suggesting the searches were conducted at the Albert house, not by Karen. 6. Deleted evidence. Text messages between police officers involved in the investigation were deleted. Phone data was mysteriously destroyed. The Albert family sold their house and had it completely gutted before it could be properly searched. 7. Butt dial. Voicemail. A drunk dial voicemail from one of the police officers' phones contained conversations about getting rid of something, which the defense argues was about disposing of evidence. 8. Basement was gutted. The Alberts renovated their basement and removed flooring shortly after the incident, destroying potential evidence of a fight inside the house. The case became even more controversial when federal investigators got involved, suggesting they were looking into whether local police had engaged in a cover-up. Karen Reed's trial began in April 2024 and lasted nearly 2 months. It was one of the most closely watched trials in Massachusetts history, with supporters gathering outside the courthouse every day holding "Free Karen Red" signs. The prosecution presented their case systematically. Karen and John fought. She was drunk and angry. She struck him with her vehicle, and she left him to die. Her statements of "I hit him" were a confession, and the physical evidence supported their theory. The defense painted a picture of a massive police cover-up. John went inside the Albert house, got into a fight with police officers or their associates, was possibly attacked by a dog, was beaten and killed, and was then dumped outside to frame Karen. The defense argued that police officers tampered with evidence, deleted communications, and closed ranks to protect one of their own. The jury heard testimony from dozens of witnesses, including forensic experts, medical examiners, police officers, and people who were at the party that night. The testimony was often contradictory, with witnesses changing their stories or having convenient memory lapses about crucial details. After 29 days of testimony and days of deliberations, the jury announced they were hopelessly deadlocked. They could not reach a unanimous verdict. The judge declared a mistrial. But here's where it gets even more controversial. Several jurors later came forward claiming they had reached consensus on some of the charges. According to these jurors, they had agreed to find Karen not guilty on the two most serious charges, second-degree murder and leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death. They were only deadlocked on the lesser charge of vehicular manslaughter. This revelation sparked outrage because, according to these jurors, the judge misunderstood their status and declared a mistrial when they could have reached a verdict. If true, this means Karen should have been acquitted on the murder charges and should not be facing retrial on those counts. Despite the controversy, prosecutors announced they would retry Karen on all charges. The retrial is currently scheduled for 2025. Drop a comment right now telling us where you're watching from and whether you think Karen is guilty or innocent. Is this a police cover-up, or did Karen murder her boyfriend? We want to hear from viewers in all 50 states. The Karen Read case has become bigger than just a murder trial. It's become a referendum on police corruption, the justice system, and whether we can trust law enforcement to investigate their own. The Free Karen Read movement has grown massive, with supporters arguing, the physical evidence doesn't support the prosecution's theory. Police had motive to frame Karen to cover up what happened inside the house. Key evidence was destroyed or tampered with. The investigation focused on Karen from minute one and ignored other possibilities. Federal investigators wouldn't be involved unless there was serious concern about corruption. Those who believe Karen is guilty argue she confessed by saying, "I hit him." Her vehicle damage matches the injuries. She had motive. They'd been fighting. The defense's theory requires massive conspiracy among dozens of people. Some of the evidence tampering claims are speculative. The case has divided Massachusetts. Canton, where the crime occurred, has been torn apart. Some residents support Karen and believe local police are corrupt. Others believe she's a murderer who killed a good cop and is now playing the victim. For John O'Keefe's family, the case has been torture. They believe Karen killed John and that her supporters are vilifying a dead man who can't defend himself. They want justice for John and believe the jury should convict Karen at retrial. For Karen Read, the case has destroyed her life. She spent over 2 years fighting murder charges, spent hundreds of thousands on legal fees, and faces the possibility of life in prison. If she's innocent, she's being punished for a crime she didn't commit while the real killers walk free. If she's guilty, she's orchestrated one of the most successful public relations campaigns in true crime history. The retrial, currently scheduled for early 2025, will give prosecutors another chance to prove Karen's guilt and give Karen another chance to prove her innocence. But the controversy surrounding the case means that no matter what verdict is reached, millions of people will believe justice wasn't served. The federal investigation continues, suggesting that authorities believe there may be merit to claims of police corruption and evidence tampering. If the feds find evidence of a cover-up, it could blow the case wide open and vindicate Karen. If they find nothing, it would suggest Karen's defense theory was just a story to create reasonable doubt. Make sure you've hit that like button and subscribe to The Only Witness. Drop one final comment telling us where you're watching from and what verdict you predict for the retrial. Will Karen be convicted, acquitted, or will there be another hung jury? Let us know. As we close out this controversial and ongoing case, we're left with more questions than answers. Did Karen Read strike John O'Keefe with her vehicle in a drunken rage and leave him to freeze to death? Or did Boston police officers beat John to death inside a house party, dump his body outside, and frame his girlfriend to cover up their crime? John O'Keefe was 46 years old, a dedicated police officer raising his niece and nephew after their parents died. He deserved better than to die in a snowbank, and his family deserves to know the truth about what happened to him. If Karen Read is innocent, she's enduring a nightmare, charged with murdering the man she loved, while the real killers hide behind their badges and let her take the fall. If she's guilty, she's a murderer who has successfully convinced millions of people that she's the victim of a conspiracy. The truth lies somewhere in the evidence, the testimony, and the actions of everyone involved that night. But with deleted texts, destroyed evidence, contradictory witness statements, and possible police corruption, finding that truth has proven nearly impossible. The retrial will give us another chance to see the evidence, hear the witnesses, and decide who's telling the truth. But in a case this controversial, this politicized, and this divisive, can any verdict satisfy everyone? John O'Keefe's family believes Karen killed him. Karen Redd's supporters believe she's being framed. The jury at the first trial couldn't decide. The jury at the second trial will have the final say. But here at The Only Witness, we'll keep following the case, examining the evidence and asking the hard questions. Did Karen do it? Or is the real killer hiding behind a badge? Thank you for watching this explosive episode covering one of America's most controversial ongoing cases. If this case captivated you, please share it with your true crime community. Don't forget to comment your state one more time before you go. Till next time, this is The Only Witness, reminding you that sometimes the people sworn to protect and serve are the ones you need protection from. And sometimes the truth is buried under badges, lies, and snowdrifts. Rest in peace, John O'Keefe. Whatever the truth is, you deserved better than this. This is The Only Witness.